being here to just, have this conversation with us. I'm here with Manny Pollard and Kristen Hayden. And, before I begin to talk too much, I just want to introduce them and let them talk a little bit about who they are, their experiences with their diving careers. So Kristen, let's start with you. Just tell everyone, a little bit about your story with diving.
I began diving when I was 10 years old, and before I did gymnastics and swimming, so then my mom just combined the two and made me do diving. And I wasn't really serious about diving at first, but then halfway through high school, I began training about every day. And then I've moved around to North Carolina to train, and then to Indiana to train. And yeah, that's basically how I got into diving.
Great. Yeah. It's crazy to see that even from a young age, you were willing to move, states to pursue this diving full time. And, it's so cool that your parents, my parents did the same thing. I didn't have to move very far. I lived in Indiana already, but, having parents that are willing to support what we do is really cool. And so Manny, now we're going to go into a little bit of your background with the sport.
So I actually got into diving because my high school didn't have gymnastics, and I didn't have any gymnastics background, but I like to flip around, I like to do all that kinds of stuff. So I was one of those self-taught gymnasts. So we didn't have a gymnastics team, and so I joined the diving team. And that first year I hated it. I thought it was terrible. Front 1.5 was easy, but inward flip was just so hard for me. I hated it. And I was willing to quit because the inward flip was like so treacherous to me. But my coach convinced me. She's like, no, stick through it. Like, everybody goes through these. And I did, and it really it picked up. Was able to go to a Division I university with an Olympic coach, which was great, an amazing experience that I've had. I had no clue where Minnesota was when I was looking at schools, but I went there, loved it, and it was a great time. And then I was like, you know what? Like, I have a huge passion for the sport. I should try to make this my profession. And so now I'm the diving coach at the University of Illinois, and I've loved my job way more than I thought I would, and it's just been an awesome experience. And it gives me opportunities to speak up in like this about serious things that aren't always about diving and stuff too. So definitely happy to be here. I think continuing having conversations like this is extremely important.
Yeah. And, I thought it was important too. And I was honored that you guys wanted me to hop on this call with you because I value the diving community, and I've known both of you for such a long time. Kristen and I, we were in juniors at the same time, and me and Manny competed in college against each other. And, it is something that isn't necessarily addressed in the diving community, or at least for me, being a white person in the community, I never really realized how I may have played into microaggressions towards Black divers, or, what you guys were experiencing was maybe not something I or other divers that look like me were really thinking about, but you guys had different experiences. And in this call, I just want to talk about those experiences so that myself and younger divers out there, or older divers who might not realize the things we say or do subconsciously might be hurtful or harmful in some way. And so I do appreciate you guys having me on this call, and I am excited to have this conversation so I can learn, and so others can learn, and we can learn how to be better allies to Black divers, to Black people in general, and just all people of color. Because when you're in the diving community, when you get to the level all three of us have been at, you're traveling the world, you're at different universities, you're around different people than maybe the community you grew up in. For me, I grew up in Indiana. It's not a super diverse place where I grew up, but I was given the opportunity at such a young age to travel, to see the world, and to compete against divers from all across the world and all walks of life. And so I feel like I was exposed at a young age to, wow, people look different than me, but at the end of the day, we're all people. And so over the years, you start to learn, how do I love people well, support them, care for them, and be an ally for them, even if we're different. And, you know, that's what I'm here to do today, is to learn and to learn from your guys' experiences. So just in the future, we as a community can be closer, we can be more inclusive, and avoid any of this unconscious bias or microaggressions that might be happening.
So I'm going to speak on that. Kristen and I are both part of the same college team. We were both on Minnesota. And we were actually never on the same team together. But when I was on the team, we had an extremely diverse team. We had one girl from China. We had a boy from Australia. We had me, a Japanese girl, a Chinese boy, and, you know, obviously some other white people too. And we had a Chinese coach too. So it was extremely diverse. And I think about my relationships with those people. One of my best friends was the Chinese girl. She grew up in Beijing, didn't learn the language till she really came to America. And then we kind of got close and started creating a great relationship. And she's one of my closest friends. And I think about where I would be without her. I was able to move to China, and she helped me with stuff like that. And I kind of got that experience to be like, you know, diversity is extremely important because it exposes you to people who are not like you at all. And that's not something that should intimidate anybody. It should be welcoming, and you should be excited to hear about somebody's different life, different perspective. And so I think back to my experience in Minnesota, I'm like, I was so blessed to be on a team that was so diverse like that. And it was such a great experience for me to realize that. In the moment, I took it for granted. So I was like, oh, well, you know, these are just my teammates. But looking back, I'm like, that is so cool to have all of those different types of people on the same team at the same time, all doing things that they love to do, diving, training every day, getting along great, hanging out on the weekends. I just find it so difficult to understand why somebody wouldn't want that, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to understand someone's different way of living? Because it might not be better, but it's another way of doing it. And it is just like, it's just so fulfilling to be able to understand someone's lifestyle like that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool to just hear how it was such a diverse team. And in turn, that even helped you and probably all the others on the team realize that people do things differently. People look different, but it's not meaning that one's better or one's not important or more important. It's just different, and there's beauty in that. And Kristen, would you say that you've had a similar experience at Minnesota, or has it been different with your time because you're still in college?
Yeah, so the team that I was on, we had 2 athletes who were from China, but other than that, it wasn't as diverse as Manny was, but still being with these 2 athletes who are from China, it was awesome just to be around their culture and to show that we both are all connected, or all of us are connected through the sport. And I learned from, I went to Junior Worlds in 2016, and even though we all couldn't speak the language, we were all in dry land having like backflip competitions. And it's like all of these different cultures and people that you don't know or you aren't living around, and you were all connected through diving. And it was just a beautiful, I looked around and I was like, this is so beautiful because we're just all connected. And I think a lot of people are just, it's kind of like a fear of the unknown, is that they don't know different people from different cultures, and they haven't been around them. But then if they are, and they're like, oh, we are really similar. So it's just exposure, which a lot of things I believe that we're lacking some. But once you're exposed to it, you're like, wow, we're all similar.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And again, it is cool to see how through diving you've been able to experience different cultures, experience different types of people, and in turn those people are experiencing your own culture, and you get to see the beauty in that, especially if you're open to learning about that. And so just kind of stepping into the next section of this conversation, we've been hearing this term microaggression a lot. We've been hearing this term of unconscious bias. And especially with microaggression, that's something I've learned, you know, especially recently with everything going on with George Floyd and a lot of the systemic racism in our nation. Manny, if you could just kind of give me some examples of unconscious bias or microaggressions that you've personally experienced in the sport of diving specifically. That would be great for everyone to listen to.
So there's an experience that comes to mind, and it was actually with my one of my teammates, and she said a comment that was kind of inappropriate and it was kind of hurtful to me. I don't want to repeat it, but it was kind of hurtful. And at the time, the team kind of was like, hey, like, you definitely shouldn't say that. Like, that's not something that, you know, you want to go around saying out loud. People are going to be upset. And she kind of thought of it. She's like, oh my gosh, you're right. I did not mean it in this way, right? Like, it was like, oh, I did not mean to hurt anybody's feelings. It was, I just didn't know. You know, it's just like Kristen said, you just don't know what you don't know. So, and, you know, going back into the exposure thing, it's like, think about, you've never had that experience. You've never had an experience where somebody had to let you know, oh, this is incorrect. Hey, you shouldn't say this. And you just continue being like, oh, well, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. Until you find out that it's wrong, you're kind of just, okay, you know, you just live your life being okay with that. And so when I think of microaggressions, I feel like a lot of it could be not knowing, or just being ignorant and not knowing that this is going to hurt someone's feelings. And so with my experience, I haven't had as many. There's been a lot of stuff with being in a sport where there's not a lot of black divers. You know, hearing things such as, you know, black divers don't point their toes, or, you know, can black people even swim, is something that I hear very often. I'm sure Kristen has heard that one before.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people, and that's the thing, maybe people just don't know that that's a microaggression, or that's because of, you know, something bigger that's really happening here in our country. And so, again, it's important to bring light to that. Like Kristen said, the exposure and the education is really what we're trying to get at, and it's the most important part.
And adding to that, exactly what Manny was saying is that if someone wouldn't have spoke up about it, then that one teammate or person could have been continued on saying these comments that are racial. And we just need to have someone to step up and say, hey, that's racist for X, Y, and Z. And it may be uncomfortable, but you have to be okay with being in that uncomfortable situation, not being everyone's favorite for a second, and stepping up and saying, hey, this is wrong. Don't say this because of this is why. And the person, honestly, like your teammate at that moment didn't even know. So it's just the type of exposure, kind of saying, hey, like you have to watch what you say. Like, and everyone's heard like, oh, like, well, like can black people swim? And like, that's such a common thing I hear when I'm like, oh, I'm a diver. And it's like, oh, I didn't know you could swim. It's like those little things need to be like done with, and they're over. We're need to be moved on from. And if you hear that, speak up about it.
Yeah. And that is something that is so important to talk about. And I would love if you could just, if you don't have any specific examples, you know, don't make something up, but what would you say the best way to step in and, you know, intervene in a moment where say I see someone making a racist remark to, let's say, you or another black diver? What would be the best way I could intervene or step in and just be a good ally in that moment? And so that moment could turn into a teaching moment, so it doesn't continue down this path of they use one microaggression, it's going to turn into another because they don't realize what they're doing necessarily.
I think the most what should happen is the conversation that would be very genuine on both sides, being like, hey, like maybe pull someone to the side, maybe not in front of a big group, and be like, hey, I think what you said might have hurt so-and-so's feelings, or maybe you should have, you know, worded it differently if you were getting at something, or you know, what were you trying to get at? And having a genuine conversation so you can understand what they mean. And maybe they're like, well, you know, I was just making a joke. I'm like, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't joke about that because of this. And, you know, it's not like, you know, it's bringing more attention to the person or the situation, but it's kind of bringing that person to, you know, one-on-one conversation and getting them to understand why they've kind of messed up, and then, you know, giving them the freedom, and hopefully they would want to do this, to apologize to the other person. And, you know, because I feel like a lot of the times, a lot of people kind of feel like can understand that, okay, that's not okay to say, but the biggest thing is, like Kristen said, is who's going to step up and who's going to be accountable, who's going to hold each other accountable in that moment. And so I think, having that genuine conversation is always the right way to go.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely pull the person aside and say, hey, I don't think that's politically correct to say, and then give them an explanation, because some people are just like, why? I don't understand. And then if you explain it to them, then they'll start to get it. And then from there on, even, I know that it could feel uncomfortable for someone in like your stance or anyone else because if something was said to me, it would feel nice for my standpoint if someone else spoke up, because I don't always want to have to say, hey, that's racist because of this. And they're like, oh, you're just saying it because you're Black. But for someone else of a different color also says, hey, that's racist because of X, Y, and Z, then they would begin to recognize it more.
I've had a lot of teammates actually do that for me, where I've had, a teammate might say something that is inappropriate and another one will step in and be like, oh, she said that? I'm going to talk to her about that because that's not okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, someone has my back, somebody understands, and it's not just me feeling like just kind of going through this awkwardness and uncomfortableness by myself, and other people kind of feel it too, and they want to step in and be like, that's not how you should treat people. Like, I'm going to go talk to that girl, or I'm going to go talk to that person about that, because I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, and it just has, like, makes you know that, like, someone else sees it, someone recognizes it, and knows that it's not okay, and they're going to step up for you. It's just a good, warming feeling. It's the same way if you see someone getting bullied, that you want to step up and say, hey, this is not right. And the person, the victim in the situation, is going to feel good, and you're going to be like, wow, like, someone has my back, and I'm not going on down this road alone, or have to deal with all of these situations by myself.
Yeah, I think that's especially good what you just said, of knowing people are going to have your back. I think from what I'm hearing, the best way me as a white person, a white diver, can be a good ally, say it's at practice or at competitions, is that if we see something going on, it's not necessarily making this big, huge thing right then and there in front of everyone, but maybe pulling that person aside, just be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This might have really hurt them, and here's why. And just come at it from a soft, loving place, but with an explanation of, I'm not just saying this to say this, but this is the implications of what you just said, and this is why it might have hurt them. And so a good way to be an ally is to not create more division, but, try to be informative in a loving, respectful manner to them as well.
And it's important because, you think, you in that moment, you might not feel like you are making a difference, or you might not feel like you're helping anything besides that one person. But I think about if everybody just didn't say anything, that kind of it makes the problem worse, right? And like I was talking about earlier, that person just continue to, spew these uncomfortable things to people, and no one's saying anything because they don't want to make anyone, they don't want to step up. And I think about if everybody did that, it's a bigger problem, but if we're each taking the steps to do what we can with the environment around us and make the space better for everyone, for the future divers, for the divers right now, I think everyone should definitely do their best to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's great. And so now, kind of switching gears a little bit, I think this is an important topic for us to just have a conversation about, and it's the topic of why the sentiment all lives matter is hurtful or harmful to the Black community and to Black divers as well.
So the statement all lives matter is hurtful because we are never saying that no one else's lives matter. Everyone's lives matter. But at this moment in time, we are getting, Black people are getting killed, and innocent Black people are getting killed, and we're saying our lives matter. We should be equal as a white person. Like, our lives should be equal. And I read an example that was really good, was if you're at a convention for breast cancer, someone's not going to come in and say, hey, all cancers matter. Like, and they're like, hey, we're talking about breast cancer right now. Like, that's what we're trying to like promote. Or if my house is on fire and I'm like, hey, I need help. And you're like, oh, all houses matter. It's like, hey, mine's burning down right now. Like can I get help with mine? But of course, all houses matter. All lives definitely matter. But right now we need the support to stop all of this brutality and for innocent Black people to being killed.
So I think a big thing about it is people feel excluded when they hear Black Lives Matter, right? Like, you hear Black Lives Matter, people just think, oh, well, it's just Black people. This doesn't affect me. I don't need to be a part of this. And all lives matter, you know, maybe people feel like that's something that they're a part of, but Kristen's right. Yes. Right now, we're trying to bring attention to the systemic racism and the police brutality that Black people are facing. And so when we hear all lives matter, to a Black person, I hear like, you know, how do you say that? Like, this isn't, like, that's not my problem, right? Like, that's not a situation that I have anything to do with, right? There's nothing that I have any interest in being a part of when I hear all lives matter. It's like, well, that's great. Like, Black lives do matter, but everyone's important. Yes, we agree. Everybody is important, but that's the problem. We don't feel like we are.
Yeah, it's like when someone says, oh, well, yes, Black lives do matter, but it's that but right there that, you know, it just devalues everything they just said before. It devalues all of a Black person's experiences, making them feel less than in that moment. Even if someone says Black lives matter, but, you know, you just took away that phrase Black lives matter by adding that but, because you're going to follow it up with something that more times than not includes yourself. Like if I were to say Black lives matter, but all lives matter, I'm saying that because I feel excluded, like you just said, Manny. It's hard for people to empathize with other groups of people when say, I don't have your experience. And, you know, I think that is oftentimes a learned thing just from where you grew up, how you grew up, the culture you grew up in. It's easy to just feel like someone else's issue is not your issue. But that's where you've got to come in and be a voice in that community of, you know what, no, Black lives do matter, and here's why.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with one of my athletes. I remember she saw, this was a few years ago, before all of this impact now. She saw the sign and she was like, Black lives matter, no, all lives matter. And I was like, oh, well, no. yes, but this is what we're talking about when you see that sign. And she was like, oh, I get it now. Yes, Black lives matter. And like, it was just that education and understanding what it actually means, and not just, you know, looking at it and coming up with your own narrative in your head and be like, oh, well, no, that's a disrespectful, like, I'm not being included in that. Why not? You know what I mean? I think a lot of people just need to be educated on the movement, because it does affect you. It affects everyone, right? It's not just Black people. Like, everybody needs to come together to help fix this problem, because, you know, us as Black people have been working through this since, you know, for centuries. And, you know, and we're still just at this point now where we're kind of still feel like we need to do what we can to show that we do matter too, and that we are important. And we need everyone to help us with this. And it's not just, oh, I'm not Black, that's their problem, I don't have to handle that, I'm going to go do the beach.
Yeah. And I think that ties into this other point of, you know, we all have a circle of influence, whether it's in our own communities, our own cultures, our social media followings. We all have people that either look up to us or are reading what we post, things we say, the ways we interact with people. And so, Kristen, I just want to kind of have you talk through what you think might be the best way people can be using their influence, whether it's 1 million followers or just their family. What's the best way people can be using their influence to help educate people or show support and be a good ally for the Black community?
So first and foremost, before you can educate anyone is educate yourself. So whoever there are multiple, there's like TED Talks out there, movies, any just articles about systematic racism. So educate yourself first, and then you can go ahead and educate others as well. And there's lots of posts on Instagram currently talking about systematic racism, or places where you can donate for justice, and using your platform to influence, because whether one person sees it or 500 people sees it, like if you help one person, then we're making a change. And the same thing goes for your family, is if you like educate them as well, because I know that a lot of my friends have been like, whoa, this has been going on, and I'm like, yes, this has been going on. Or I've had a lot of people say, hey, I've seen your post, and I clicked on the link and I donated. So using your platform, talking to other people, having that conversation, even though it could be awkward, just sitting down and having that conversation with other people, or pointing out, hey, that's not right, that's like, that's racist, that's not right. Like all of those steps that just a single person can make, this is where all this movement starts. It's just one person and all these individual people together, and they're taking baby steps. And this is where we have a huge movement. But it takes time, but it's from one action.
Mm-hmm. I think about being a coach, and my coaching philosophy is I'm going to be coaching these athletes to be better people, better citizens. And so, a big thing on my team is we work on team dynamic all the time. We make sure everybody feels comfortable, everybody feels authentic, everybody is in a space where they can be themselves. And, having that as my philosophy, I found it very important to bring up this topic, because it's about how you're treating people. It's about how you interact with people who are around you, right? And so I think about being a coach, and I've heard stories of athletes who are Black and are on teams and haven't heard anything from their coaches or anything from their athletic departments. And so I want to use my platform or my influence as a coach to kind of step up and be like, listen, you are, if you're feeling like this, I'm here with you. I understand what you're going through. Reach out to me. And so I find it very important that I continue to step up, because there aren't that many Black diving coaches out in the world. There are a few in our country, but in the Big Ten, I'm the only one. And so I want to use that platform so people can understand and see that, yes, I'm a Black diving coach. Yes, I have your back. This is important. It's not just you feeling the way you feel. And yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good that, Manny, you touched on like the direct circle of influence, and Kristen, you talked about how, you saying one thing can lead to so many other things, of someone learning about something or someone making a donation, or, and that can have a snowball effect. Both of those in your direct circle, whether you're a coach and it's your divers, or, your colleagues, or it's your Instagram following or your family, everything can snowball. Because as you become educated, like myself, as I'm learning more, I'm sharing what I'm learning, and that's creating conversations between me and other people. And who knows what kind of conversations that might be creating on their end with their circle of influence. And I think it is so important that we use our influence to really focus on the issues at hand, whether they personally affect me or not. It's an opportunity for me to get educated, to be a supportive person, and to share what I'm learning and ask questions if I don't have the answer. I know Manny and I talked yesterday, and he talked about how, silence can be more hurtful than, saying the wrong thing. Because if you're speaking, if you're willing to have that conversation, you're showing that you're willing to learn. If you're being silent, if you are not willing to talk about it, you're really closing yourself off to just having any growth in that area. And I think with our circles of influence, if we have those conversations like you guys are talking about, there's just so much opportunity for growth and for change to actually happen. I mean, we're even seeing that the protests going on right now are having a direct impact on the various issues that are going on with George Floyd's, the officer that killed George Floyd having his charges increased and the other officers getting arrested and Breonna Taylor's case being reopened. There are so many things that are snowballing into place because people are willing to just stand and speak out, even if we don't have the answers, even if we say the wrong things. It's a moment for growth and it's a moment for change.
Well, the important thing is, I talk about with my team all the time, is never be scared to have a hard conversation. Like, it's okay to have a hard conversation, knowing that it's coming from a place of, it's genuine, meaning, hey, I don't understand this. Can we talk about this? And I feel like when someone's being silent, especially on a matter like this, as a Black person, it seems that, again, this person doesn't care about Black lives as a whole, including me, because I'm a part of that community. And so like we talked about yesterday, having that conversation and being silent is detrimental. But if you want to have a conversation and ask questions and try to understand different perspectives, that's what we're trying to do. That's what you want to do, right? To try to get on the same page and understand that this is more than a political matter. This is everyone's matter. Like, this is everyone versus racism. It's not just political. It's not a political stance like a lot of people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. When people just aren't saying anything, it hurts because you're like, you know what's going on and you're turning a blind eye to it or saying, this isn't my problem. Mm-hmm. And you want someone to step up about it. And those who are posting and are advocating, it feels good because it's like, wow, like they see it, they recognize it, they know what's going on, they have our backs. And as Manny said, this isn't political. This is everyone versus racism.
Well, I think of an experience, again, like say I'm on the team and I hear someone call Kristen an inappropriate word. That's just like, to me, it just seems like just being like, oh, well, okay. Sorry, Kristen. But like, again, it's about being holding that person accountable and talking, having that hard conversation to make the space better for you, that person, and Kristen. It should be the goal for everyone. That's kind of a small example, but that's kind of what we're all trying to get at here, right? Is having everyone be okay, being more comfortable with having a hard conversation. If you don't know the answer to something, go ahead, educate, research first. And if you still can't find anything, then, ask a question. Like, hey, I'm sorry if this is offensive. I really just want to understand. Can we talk about it? And no matter who you're talking to, no one should hear that and be upset about it, because we want everyone to understand how we feel. And I want to understand how you feel too.
Yeah, and hard conversations are sometimes the best. Sometimes when you have hard conversations, this is when you learn the most. So, and yes, it will be uncomfortable at the moment, but it's better in the long run. You'll learn, you'll get how you're feeling, you'll get how I'm feeling, and we can move on from it. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's good to remind everyone watching, even myself, that the hard conversations are what bring about change personally and in the community around us. And if you're not willing to have those hard conversations, in a way, you're not willing to grow, to recognize that, I might have a fault that needs changing. Mm-hmm. And to be able to have those hard conversations, you have to be okay knowing you're not perfect and you're not always right. And there's a lot you got to learn. And I think that's just so important for everyone in the diving community. When we see things going on, being willing to step up, speak out, but also, even if nothing's going on, taking a step back and being willing to have tough conversations if we don't know what we don't know. Because like Manny talked about at the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And so the only way we're going to find those answers is by having hard conversations and opening ourselves up to learning. And that goes with racial diversity, but that also goes with every other type of diversity. There's a lot that we don't know because we're different, and that's good. That's okay. And we can come together piece by piece and draw the diving community closer and closer, one conversation at a time.
One thing I said this exact same thing in our team meeting, and I was like, it's really about how you handle every type of relationship, not just a diversity thing. It's really every type of relationship is not, cowering when you are scared to talk up about something that's important to you, right? If you feel like something's not right, or you feel like you don't feel comfortable with something, bring it up, talk about it, have the hard conversation, because it's going to help your experience. It's going to help someone else's experience to kind of get that different perspective. And oh, that's not something I really thought about. You know, and it's going to help your relationship with that person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now going forward, I just kind of want to see, just get you guys' thoughts on what are some ways that we might be able to increase diversity in diving? You know, just off the top of your head, what do you think might be a way to bring, you know, new potential athletes into the sport and give them opportunities to, you know, grow in the sport, do something they might enjoy, but also set them up to have a potential future as a collegiate athlete, and that might open up many other doors as well?
Let me say, with my experience, I remember I was a young diver, and just after I conquered the inward flip, I was like, okay, well, maybe I could start doing more. So I started doing research, right? I'm looking up, I'm like, okay, who are some good divers, Olympic divers, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I came up across a video of Jose Guerra from like many years ago. And he's not African-American, but he is of darker complexion. And so young little black Manny was like, oh, there's a black guy, he's diving. That's so cool. Like, I can do it too. Like, and he's actually super good. So I was like, okay, like, I want to continue doing this because I want to be as good as him, right? He was a role model. And then I was exposed to Mike Wright, who was a national champion. He was a black national champion a few years before me. He's actually coaching over at Tennessee Diving Club, I think. But having that exposure was like enough for me to be like, oh, I can continue doing this. I can continue doing this. And I think about if I didn't have that, it would have been much harder, you know, to continue doing the sport. Now, if we had even more of that, you know, it's going to open the door for a lot of people. Because I think about my experience going to Minnesota, getting an education in psychology, loving that, having a passion for that outside of diving too. I would have never thought about if I never even got into diving, if I never continued, you know, practicing my inward flips. I never even started the sport, right? So if we can figure out, well, you know, getting that exposure, showing that there are Black people who do this sport will help more Black people wanting to be a part of it. And I think about people, you know, trailblazers, Jose Guerra, Yona Night Wisdom, Kristen Hayden, Jennifer Abel, just darker complexion athletes. People are going to look at it and be like, oh, I can, I want to, and this looks fun, right? And I want to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, and basically coming.
Oh yeah, Kristen, go.
What for Manny says, I remember watching Manny, like when I was a really young diver, and I saw Manny at a meet, and I was like, whoa, like there's another Black diver, and we actually stayed, and my parents and I stayed and watched him because we were like, oh wow, like, and it just drew me to him. And I remember watching a video and seeing Jennifer Abel in Canada, and I was like, wow, like I was just amazed because it was someone that I was like looking up to, because she was like, I related to her. I was like, wow, she's like amazing. She's another Black diver, and it's mostly the exposure. And I think if USA Diving can promote their darker complexion divers, or me and Manny, and put that out there, then it will draw more people. Or to even, there are Black swim teams, and like Howard University has a dive team, and to reach out to them and just show them like diving, because before, like my mom didn't even know about diving until someone told her about it, and going to those swim teams and showing like, hey, like diving, like this is like an awesome sport, and then it would attract more people. Or I know that Canada, they do talent testing, and doing talent testing in places where they wouldn't normally have diving, like in the inner city, will bring more people in. I actually had a counselor here that came to camp, and she told me, because she was all nervous, and I was like, what? And she's like, I've been watching you for 3 years. She's like, you were the reason why I started diving. So like seeing another Black girl diving, I was like, okay, yeah. And she actually made an account, Black girls diving, and just for us to like reach out to each other and be like, hey, we're not the only ones here. It's like there's a couple, but it'd be nice to get promoted and to draw more people in. And I think just when you have, like, when I saw like Jennifer Abel, I was like, well, I want to dive because I want to be like her. And everyone wants idols. So to find a Black diver is a little bit harder, but to promote it will draw more diversity into diving.
Another idea that was brought up to me was, I was talking to Emily Richmond, who's a USA Diving judge, and she was like, well, you know, we should invite elementary school students to come watch a big meet, right? Or come watch practice at Olympic trials or at USA Nationals. And it would just, even like we were talking before, if you can just get that one kid to be like, oh, that is so cool, I want to try that. And then giving them an opportunity to try it, who knows how that's going to impact their life. I think of my experience, not my whole life, but a good chunk of my life is about this sport, right? And if I didn't have this sport, I don't know what I would be doing. I don't know where I would be. And I am genuinely grateful and happy to be part of this sport. And I love it so much. And I think it's so important that we should give as many darker skin complexion kids this opportunity to fall in love with something that they would have never even known about.
Yeah, I was actually in Florida diving at just a pool club, and this is a while back, and this group of like Black kids came over and they were like, whoa, and they were like kind of watching what I do, and then they would go off and try, and they're like, oh, this is fun, and they, like, I would go do something, and then they would try and up me on something. So it's just kind of, it draws you, and I think that's how anyone is. If no matter what the race is, if you see someone doing great in a sport or talent or anything, and a young person sees them, they relate, and they're like, well, I want to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having that place of influence on, especially younger kids as they're starting to figure out what diving is, or they just learned how to swim and they see these people up on the boards. That's how I was when I was younger. I learned to swim and I immediately got on a board because I'd rather be jumping off high stuff than just swimming in the pool. And, having someone to look up to that's doing it, say someone goes to the pool and sees you doing a front 3.5, Kristen, they're going to be like, wow, I want to learn how to do that someday. It gives them the exposure to the sport. It gives them this sense of, I don't know what it is. It's just a sense of confidence knowing that, wow, they're doing that. If they're doing it, I can do it too. And if there are opportunities in place where that kid could have an opportunity to actually jump off a board and try it for the first time and get into lessons and learn how to dive properly, again, that snowballs year after year into them being able to do that front 3.5. And it all stems from, they saw you do that dive at a local pool or high school pool or even a college pool. And it sparked something in them knowing that if you're doing it, they can do it too. And if we can give them the resources to do it, that could be a potential Olympian right there and give them potential to go to college on scholarship, really study something they want to love and set them up for the future. Giving them this opportunity to dive, like Manny talked about, leads to a lot of other opportunities in your life. And having people like Manny, like Kristen, who are influencers of that, they're able to influence that generation coming up. I think you guys hit it on the head that is just so vital. Having that exposure is going to be important for younger kids, knowing that they can do it.
So I was actually, one of my best friends was on a podcast last week, and he brought up, they were talking, and one of the girls on the podcast said her roommate in college was Black. And on the first day of school, her roommate came running in and was like, oh my God, I had a Black teacher today. And it's a situation like that where it's like that girl probably never even thought about being a professor, or she never even thought that was an option for her because of her skin color, right? Because she's never even seen that. So having that exposure and seeing that and knowing that other people like you are interested in those things too, that it is, getting the exposure of me and Kristen is so important. Kristen and I have talked about this. I've had several athletes, Black athletes reach out to me being like, hey, I've been watching you since, this, that, and the third. You've inspired me to continue diving, or you've inspired me to stay with the sport. And these are inspirations that I've never even thought about, right? I'm not thinking about inspiring young Black kids when I'm trying to do my handstand. on this 10 meter for this Chinese man, but but it's what's happening, right? It's the kids are looking, you know. I can't talk about it enough. Like, it's so inspirational just to even see someone of your skin color being able to do the sport. I bet Kristen has had very similar experiences too.
Yeah, and especially now with social media, just a post, like, kids are always on it, and they can just see one post and it's like, oh wow, this one, oh, I see a black diver and be like, maybe I should try diving. And I remember going to Tennessee for my first national and meeting Mike Wright, and he definitely helped me push to go diving, because I know that he was in the Olympic trials, and he signed a Tennessee shirt for me, and I savored that thing. It's still hanging up on my wall and at home, and I was like, wow, like, I want to be like Mike Wright. And then I saw Manny there, and I was like, whoa, wow, this is awesome. Yeah, I was like, wow, because where I was from, I mean, I'm from New Jersey, and there weren't many, there wasn't much diversity in the meet. So going to nationals and seeing, like, just two black divers, I was like, wow, this is awesome. I want to keep up with it. And I went right back home, and I was like, all right, I'm ready. Ready to keep training.
Yeah, that's great. Just knowing that exposure plays a big role in even both your stories, seeing other people do it and you giving that exposure to younger divers, and then just having the opportunity to try the sport, to get on a board, to get to a pool, to have the resources to be able to train once a week, twice a week. That really can go a long way. And you get to nationals, you see these divers in this new element that are going to Olympic trials, that are going to the Olympics. They're very inspirational for you. Like Kristen said, everyone wants to have an idol, and that just adds another layer of motivation to keep going, which in turn opens up a lot of opportunities.
Well, I think about even you, Steele, right? Like, in a situation like this where a lot of people are posting about the Black Lives Matter movement on social media, right? If you're a young black diver, someone's telling you, hey, you should look up Steele Johnson, right? He's a great diver. You're going to love him. Like, okay, great. You know, looks up Steele, follows him. You know, this whole thing is happening with Black Lives Matter. And then, you know, seeing you post something of you protesting is going to be like, oh, well, like, Steele is this great role model for me, and he even sticks up for me, and he's supportive of black people and stuff. And that's going to help someone continue doing the sport, right? It's going to help someone feel welcome in this space, even though he may never meet you, even though you guys may never talk, or you might. It's just knowing that someone up there is thinking about you, and it's not all just athletics all the time, right? It's great to be good at diving, but it's not all just athletics. It's about teaching people, and it's about creating great relationships with people. And just even you might feel like you might not have a role in this, but you do. You play a big role in this, because a lot of people will look up to you, you know, regardless of their race or color. But, you know, seeing you stick up for someone in this way is gonna speak volumes of who you are, and it's gonna really, you know, have people, again, feel welcome and want to be a part of this community and want to continue in this.
Yeah, and I think you said it well too, of, you know, diving just isn't about the diving, it's about the relationships. You want to be able to go to nationals, go to a competition and feel safe. You want it to be a safe space. You want to feel like you are welcomed and you belong and you can make friends, whether they're getting last place or first place. You want to build those relationships and build those friendships. I know when I walk into a meet, I want to enjoy my time there. I want to enjoy the other divers, and I want to be the person that other people can walk into a meet and know, oh, that's Steele. He's supportive of me. He cares about me. We've never met, but I feel like he's an approachable person. And a lot of it goes back to, with Black Lives Matter going on right now, I have a choice to either post about that and show my support for that and continue trying to build relationships in the diving community and support others that don't look like me, or I can keep posting my diving videos like nothing's going on and try to maintain this, oh, well, I'm one of the top, so I just need to only post diving. That's what people want to see. And it's, at the end of the day, it's, who cares if people are following me for diving? There's a much bigger issue at hand going on right now. Diving posts will return, you know, posts for X, Y, and Z sponsors, whatever, those will happen. But right now, what's important is am I educating myself, and am I showing other people, because I am on social media so much, am I showing people that, hey, I am with you, I'm learning, I'm trying my best to love you. You know, this is what I want to be focusing on right now, so that you have a safe space and you have even just one safe person to say hi to at nationals. It is important that diving is the relationships. It's not just the sport. And that's something, you know, my coach, Adam Soldati, hits heavy on, is that, you know, you come to the team to learn to be a better diver, but my goal is to make you a better person. And that's something I've really just held on to is, you know, diving is great. You can go win an Olympic medal. Yay. But what you're really going to value are the relationships you made along the way and the friends you've made and the times you've had with them.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, you just posting about like the Black Lives Matter, it's huge because we want, as we were saying, like, we want more diversity in the sport. But how do we keep the diversity when they come is if they feel comfortable. So just by looking at some of the top divers like you, and they see your post like Black Lives Matter, and they're like, wow, okay, they do care. And just like being there, it makes them feel comfortable, because as of right now, there isn't going to be a lot of diversity at meets. But if they know that people have their back and they feel comfortable, then it'll be fine. But if everyone's just going on, just disregarding it, then it's like, wow, I don't think they care about me or my culture. And there will be that awkwardness for the person, like, or the Black person. So yeah.
It really is for the betterment of the sport. It's not about anything other than that. Well, it is, but it's for the betterment of, you know, creating an environment that people feel safe in. And it's not a political thing all the time. You know, it affects you, it affects me, it affects our sport, and it's an important topic for sure. It's the hard conversation.
Yeah. And it just goes back to that, like, are we willing to have the hard conversations to learn to grow as people, to be more accepting, inviting, and support the groups of people, in this case, the Black Lives Matter movement with the police brutality? Are we willing to see that as important and support the people that are directly affected by that? And it goes back to those hard conversations. If I'm staying silent, if I'm not taking the time to learn, but I'm just still gung-ho on practice and watching diving videos and doing nothing but diving, I might get a little better at diving, but, you know, I'm not doing my, due diligence in the diving community, because I'm not making it about the community, about diving as a whole. I'm making it about me.
Yep, 100%.
Well, cool. Was there anything else? I mean, especially of the questions we've got, is there anything we really want to make sure we hit?
There was a question on here that, sorry, it was, you know, being unhelpful to the movement. And Kristen kind of talked about it a little bit. The worst thing you want to do right now is stay silent. The worst thing you want to do is not say anything. You know, you don't need to be posting. You don't need to be reaching out to your Black friends. But I think trying to understand a different perspective than your own is going to be helpful for you, and to understand the bigger picture. You understand how other people are feeling, and it's about education. It's just so important.
Yeah, and Kristen, I mean, same question for you. Just what are some actions that are unhelpful to the movement of Black Lives Matter?
Just, as Manny said, silence. Like, you're just sitting there, not saying, doing anything, not even educating yourself about it. And that's just hurting the movement in itself. Is just silence. We need people to speak up, speak out. We can't, the Black community can't battle it itself, and it's not political. It's against racism as ending of itself. So just speak up. Please,
yeah, I mean, just to echo what you said, like, that is so important to realize that this is not a political issue. As much as everyone on social media wants to make this a political issue, it's not. Like you just said, Kristen, this is a human rights issue. This is an issue that goes beyond whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. That doesn't matter. What matters is, do you believe that Black lives matter, that Black lives are important, and are you willing to stand up, speak out, and step up when you see injustice or see racism taking place?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just if you believe in equality, like everyone, we're all made the same. We're all humans. We all have hearts. Like, do you believe in equality? It's just the color of our skin is really differentiating us. And it's like, do you believe that we are equal as someone with a lighter complexion? So.
Yeah, that's great. That's just, even for me as a white person, it's important to remember that, you know, there are cultural differences, but do we have the ability to see those differences and love those differences and be excited about those differences and be willing to learn and value those as equal, not better, not worse, just as equal. We're humans. Like he said, we all have hearts, we all have brains. It's just the color of our skin is different. The way we grew up is different. But are we willing to see that as good? And are we willing to see each other as equals?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I just had this one thought was, as we have to take like a safe sport kind of online thing. What if we put bias in there as well? And just like, as just a thing to say, hey, this would be bias, or just because some people just don't know, as in some bias or like statements that you shouldn't like mention. It's just some unknown.
Yeah. In that safe sport training that we have to take, having a section that provides everyone with education of, this is what an unconscious bias looks like. This is what a microaggression looks like. You know, even for me, that could be super educational, of having those examples of this situation's going on. How do you need to respond? Was this a microaggression? And through that in a way forces all the athletes to learn about this and to have no excuse for being uneducated in some form about this. Mm-hmm. Kristen, I think that's a really good and like practical thing we could add pretty much right away.
And sorry, this is Kelly from USA Diving. Just to jump in, we did create a resource center, and we do have some trainings that we've put up there on bias and on aggression and on unconscious bias. So anybody who's listening that wants to take a look at that, if you just go to the USA Diving website, there is now a diversity, equality, and inclusion section that has links to some great resources, not only for sports, but to just learn how to be more inclusive in general.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Manny, Kristen, is there any other specific topic you guys are wanting to hit before we end this off?
No, I would just say treat people the way you want to be treated. You know, that's what we learn when we're younger. Same thing. The way that you want to be treated, it's the same way I want to be treated, or any other person want to be treated. So, yeah.
Yeah, and continue having the hard conversations and don't stray away from it. It's going to help you become stronger, and it's going to create a better environment for yourself and the people around you. And you really want to leave a conversation with somebody, an experience with somebody, knowing that that person's better because you came in contact with them, and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Kristen, Manny, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, and B, for allowing me to be a part of this conversation and just hear your guys' stories, hear how you have been impacted by sport, but also the experiences you've had as a Black athlete as well. And I feel like I myself have learned a lot, and I hope the people that are watching have learned a lot too. yeah, so again, thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. And, you know, I'm excited to see what both of you do in the future. Kristen, you're still diving, and Manny, you're still coaching. So we are going to be seeing each other at meets in the future. And yeah, it's just cool to be able to have this conversation with you guys today.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Steele.
Thank you. Thank you so much.